One of the first things that you want to do when you're working on the snare drum etude this year is make sure that you understand the tempo relationships between the beginning 4/4 or 2/4 and then the 9/8. So math is not my best thing, but here's what I know. Whatever tempo that you do want to play, beginning that 2/4, times it by 2, and then divide it by 3, and then that will give you the number that you want to be working with at the 9/8. Truthfully, the 144 is, I don't know, it's about as fast as I can actually play it. So there's probably people out there that can play it faster, but I find it very challenging to keep it at the 144. So I highly recommend that you begin slower. And again, it's important to keep the tempo relationships correct. So let's say you begin at 120, for example. Well, we would times that by 2, let's see, 2 times 120, 240, divide it by 3, that means the 9/8 tempo would be at 80. But you just don't want to practice an arbitrary number for the 2/4 section and then an arbitrary number for the 9/8 section because it won't be compatible. So if you learn that there is a relationship, it will be really helpful. Personally, I think if you were to do it at 132, 126, it's probably all going to be fine. I think what you're wanting to make sure that you go for is clarity of the rhythm. Of course, you're doing the dynamics and all of that kind of thing, but the tempo relationship, I think, is one of the key aspects of this particular etude. Now, at the end of this tutorial or this video will be my markings for this snare etude. So it will show my stickings and maybe just a few dynamic insights. Keep in mind, I'm left-handed, so that will probably mean if you're right-handed, much of it will just be the reverse. But in any event, I think the stickings will be helpful to you to at least see how someone else did it. Don't be fooled by some of the measures. When you look at measures 11 through 14 and you see the 3/16, it's like, oh my goodness, what's going on here? And so you're thinking, okay, I got to keep the 8th note steady, or no, I've got to think about the 16th notes, and now I've got to just do 3 per dotted 8th beat. Well, this is a really common accent pattern that we all have done many times, and if you were to see the same pattern in 3/4, you would recognize it and go, oh, well, that's pretty easy. So that would be a set of measures that I would look at as if it being in 3/4. You have 12 16th notes, that is 3 quarter beats, and it just turns out to be that really standard 1 2 3 1 type of accent pattern, which again is something that most of us have done and many times in other pieces. So there's a couple other measures that are exactly like that, or phrases where it looks a little peculiar, but when you really dig in, you find out it's actually a pretty familiar rhythm or pattern. The dynamics, and this is something that I think not as unique to me, but is something that I stress a lot, and it is always the source of one of my favorite puns. When it comes to dynamics, use your head. And by that I mean, when you want to play louder, play more towards the center of the drum head. And when you want to play softer, play more towards the edge of the drum head. And then correspondingly, when you're playing louder, your sticks are higher. And when you're playing softer, your sticks are lower. I'm hoping you will notice that on my playing of the etude, is that you're noticing different stick positions on the drum head as well as the appropriate height. Now, one caveat about the height, when it comes to rolls, and we're doing multiple bounce rolls in this piece, you want to keep the sticks as pretty much as close to the head as possible, and that is what's going to create that tight mesh of roll sound in order for it to sound smooth and as one tone. As far as the rolls go, for all the 8th notes, I'm moving my hands 2 times, so those are 5-stroke rolls, and then any of the quarter note rolls are 9-stroke rolls. The very last roll of the piece, the 2 measures, it's a whole note and then 2 half notes. Here's what I found. If you are playing the faster tempos, so if it's 144, which what I was going for. Or I'm going to say if you're 136, maybe 132, those types of tempos, I think you're going to have to change the roll speed to be that of eighth note triplets. I don't think it will work for most people to try to keep up doing 16th notes, because you just can't do it, or I couldn't do it. So I made it to the roll value of triplets, and I felt that that was pretty successful, and that's something that I certainly will be recommending my students who are doing the faster tempos. Again, if you're maybe going to perform it at a slower tempo, it might be that you do not need to change the roll speed for those last two measures of the snare drum etude. Just a small point that I think is good is the composer of this piece, Michael Thursby. I contacted him and just asked what was his inspiration for writing the piece and all of that kind of stuff. And he just wrote back and he said, well, you know, the Cerrone snare drum book, the 50 Portraits in Rhythm, is an important book. And I definitely was inspired by some of the patterns from that book. And when you think, and if you've done some of the snare drum etudes from the Cerrone Portraits in Rhythm, you will recognize maybe even some of the rhythms being somewhat like the Cerrone, but any of the etude prep that you might do from Cerrone, you will feel like it will be helpful to you as you do this particular etude. So stay for the end of the video, look at my markings, and you'll see what I did. And again, I hope it's helpful to you, and best of luck in your snare drum audition preparation.